only deepened my affection for them.
Chapter 1. Homecomings. Under a chill, grey sky, 2 riders jogged across the turf. Taran, the taller horseman, set his face against the wind and leaned forward in the saddle, his eyes on the distant hills. At his belt hung a sword, and from his shoulder a silver-bound battle-horn. His companion Gurgi, shaggier than the pony he rode, pulled his weathered cloak around him, rubbed his frost-nipped ears, and began groaning so wretchedly that Taran at last reined up the stallion.
"No, no," Gurgi cried. "Faithful Gurgi will keep on. He follows kindly master, oh yes, as he has always done. Never mind his shakings and achings, never mind the droopings of his poor tender head."
Taran smiled, seeing that Gurgi, despite his bold words, was eyeing a sheltering grove of ash-trees. "There is time to spare," he answered. "I long to be home, but not at the cost of that poor tender head of yours. We camp here and go no farther until morning." They tethered their mounts and built a small fire in a ring of stones. Gurgi curled up and was snoring almost before he had finished swallowing his food. Though as weary as his companion, Taran set about mending the harness leathers. Suddenly he stopped and jumped to his feet. Overhead, a winged shape plunged swiftly toward him. "Look!" Taran cried, as Gurgi, still heavy with sleep, sat up and blinked. "It's Kor! Dyrnwyn must have sent him to find us." The crow beat his wings, clacked his beak, and began squawking loudly, even before he landed on Taran's outstretched wrist.
"Eilonwy!"
Kor croaked at the top of his voice.
"Eilonwy! Princess! Home!"
Taran's weariness fell from him like a cloak. Gurgi, wide awake and shouting joyfully, scurried to unloose the steeds. Taran leapt astride Menelaus, spun the grey stallion about, and galloped from the grove, with Kor perched on his shoulder and Gurgi and the pony pounding at his heels. Day and night they rode, hardly halting for a mouthful of food or a moment of sleep, urging all speed and strength from their mounts and from themselves, ever southward, down from the mountain valley and across great Achren until, on a bright morning, the fields of Caer Dallben lay before them once again. From the instant Taran set foot across the threshold, such a commotion filled the cottage that he scarcely knew which way to turn. Kor had immediately begun jabbering and flapping his wings. Carl, whose great bald crown and broad face shone with delight, was clapping Taran on the back, while Gurgi shouted in glee and leapt up and down in a cloud of shedding hair. Even the ancient enchanter Dallben, who seldom let anything disturb his meditations, hobbled out of his chamber to observe the welcomings. In the midst of it all, Taran could hardly glimpse Eilonwy, though he heard the voice of the princess very clearly above the din.
"Taran of Caer Dallben," she cried, as he strove to draw near her. "I've been waiting to see you for days. After all the time I've been away learning to be a young lady, as if I weren't one before I left. When I'm home at last, you're not even here."
In another moment he was at her side. The slender princess still wore at her throat the crescent moon of silver, and on her finger the ring crafted by the fair folk. But now a band of gold circled her brow, and the richness of her apparel made Taran suddenly aware of his travel-stained cloak and muddy boots.
"And if you think living in a castle is pleasant," Eilonwy went on without a pause for breath, "I can tell you it isn't. It's weary and dreary. They've made me sleep in beds with goose-feather pillows enough to stifle you. I'm sure the geese needed them more than I did. The feathers, that is, not the pillows. And servitors to bring you exactly what you don't want to eat, and washing your hair, whether it needs it or not, and sewing and weaving and curtsying, and all such I don't even want to think about. I've not drawn a sword for I don't know how long."
Eilonwy stopped abruptly and looked curiously at Taran.
"That's odd," she said. "There's something different about you. It's not your hair, though it does look as if you'd cropped it yourself with your eyes shut. Well, I can't quite say. I mean, unless you told someone, they'd never guess you were an assistant pig-keeper."
Taran laughed fondly at Eilonwy's puzzled frown. Alas, it's been long since I last tended Henwen. Indeed, when we journeyed among the folk of the Free Comets, Gurgi and I toiled at nearly everything but pig-keeping. This cloak I wove at the loom of Dwivak the Weaver-woman. This sword, Hevid the smith taught me the forging of it. And this, he said with a trace of sadness, drawing an earthen bowl from his jacket. Such as it is, I made at the wheel of Anlor clay-shaper. He put the bowl in her hands. If it pleases you, it is yours.
It's lovely, answered Eilonwy. Yes, I shall treasure it. But that's what I mean, too. I'm not saying you aren't a good assistant pig-keeper, because I'm sure you're the best in Prydain. But there's something more.
You speak truth, princess, put in Carl. He left us a pig-keeper, and comes back looking as if he could do all he set his hand to, whatever.
Taran shook his head. I learned I was neither swordsmith nor weaver, nor, alas, a shaper of clay. Gurgi and I were already homeward bound when Kor found us, and here shall we stay.
I'm glad of that, replied Eilonwy. All anyone knew about you was that you were wandering every which where. Dallben told me you were seeking your parents. Then you met someone you thought was your father, but wasn't. Or was it the other way round? I didn't altogether understand it.
There is little to understand, Taran said. What I sought, I found, though it was not what I had hoped.
No, it was not,
murmured Dallben, who had been watching Taran closely.
You found more than you sought, and gained perhaps more than you know. I still don't see why you wanted to leave Caer Dallben, Eilonwy began.
Taran had no chance to reply, for now his hand was seized and shaken vigorously. "Hello! Hello!" cried a young man with pale blue eyes and straw-coloured hair. His handsomely embroidered cloak looked as though it had been water-soaked, then wrung out to dry. His boot-lacings, broken in several places, had been retied in large, straggling knots. Prince Rune! Taran had almost failed to recognize him. Rune had grown taller and leaner, though his grin was as broad as it had ever been. "King Rune, actually," the young man answered, "since my father died last summer. That's one of the reasons why Princess Eilonwy is here now. My mother wanted to keep her with us on Mona to finish her education, and you know my mother. She'd never have left off with it, even though Dallben had sent word Eilonwy was to come home, and so," he proudly added, "I finally put my foot down. I ordered a ship fitted out, and off we sailed from Mona Haven. Amazing what a king can do when he sets his mind to it." "We've brought someone else along, too," Rune continued, gesturing toward the fireside, where Taran for the first time noticed a pudgy little man sitting with a cookpot between his knees. The stranger licked his fingers and wrinkled a flabby nose at Taran. He made no attempt to rise, but only nodded curtly while the scraggly fringe of hair around his bulbous head stirred like weeds under water. Taran stared, not believing what he saw. The little man drew himself up and sniffed with a mixture of haughtiness and wounded feelings. "One should have no trouble remembering a giant," he said testily. "Remember you?" replied Taran. "How could I not? The cavern on Mona. Last time I saw you, though, you were bigger, to say the least. But it is you, nevertheless. It is, indeed. Glue." "When I was a giant," Glue said, "few would have forgotten me so quickly. Unfortunate that things worked out as they did. Now, in the cavern—" "You've started him off again," Eilonwy whispered to Taran. "He'll go on like that until you're fairly wilted, about the glorious days when he used to be a giant. He'll only stop talking to eat, and only stop eating to talk. I can understand his eating, since he lived on nothing but mushrooms for so long, but he must have been wretched as a giant, and you'd think he'd want to forget it." "I knew Dallben sent Kor with a potion to shrink Glue back to size," Taran answered. "Of what happened to him since then, I've had no word." "That's what happened to him," said Eilonwy. "As soon as he got free of the cavern, he made his way to Rune's castle. No one had the heart to turn him away, though he bored us all to tears with those endless, pointless tales of his. We took him with us when we sailed, thinking he'd be grateful to Dallben and want to thank him properly. Not a bit of it. We almost had to twist his ears to get him aboard. Now that he's here, I wish we'd left him where he was." But three of our